Our small group focused on a sixth grader named Eldin. Meet Eldin. Eldin watches as his partners, Jerry and Jose, put a card under the synonym category. The assignment was to sort sentences with unfamiliar words according to the specific type of context clue. Meanwhile, Eldin notices his sixth grade language arts teacher, Miss Schmidt, is working with a group of students to check their answers on the sort. I am not smart. When will I be able to help my group for once, or finish something first before everyone else? It was like this in Germany too. I always needed extra help with my German reading and writing. Ring! Time for lunch. Students leave their context clue sorts on the floor and head to lunch. They will be back for one more period of language arts after lunch. Eldin moved to the USA from Germany 2 years ago. He is originally from Bosnia. Eldin speaks Bosnian with his soccer teammates and friends. A highlight for Eldin's family is being able to live in a large Bosnian community where there is a Bosnian grocery store and restaurant near their home. In predicting challenging factors and positive factors for Eldin, we first want to talk about his home language. He speaks Bosnian at home. A challenging factor could be the difference with the way plural words are formed in Bosnian compared to English. The plural S and ES ending does not exist in the Bosnian language. A positive factor is that he can speak Bosnian at home well. Eldin's level of ELP, he was a level 3 on the language acquisition chart. A positive factor is that he has been in the United States for 2 years and is right on target with the expected language acquisition level. In looking at socioeconomic status, according to the Wright textbook, 60% of ELLs come from low-income homes. A possible challenging factor could be if one or more of his parents work during the evenings or can't afford supplemental materials to help Eldin, such as a tutor, books, technology resources. In looking at educational achievement, his parents are likely not yet educated in the U.S. A possible challenging factor here relates to his parents being able to help him with his English schoolwork. A positive factor is that Eldin lives in a neighborhood that has a large Bosnian community, and he brings that wealth of cultural and home language experiences that he can bring to his U.S. education. And looking at special education considerations, it would be essential for teachers to go through the MTSS, which used to be called RTI process here. A challenging factor for Eldin is that he is struggling in his literacy development. He may benefit from a Tier 2 intervention focused on a targeted area of need in the area of his literacy development. And then after a set time for this intervention, Eldin's progress may be reviewed, and depending on what the data shows, he could move to a more intensive Tier 3 intervention. A positive factor is that teacher teams or PLCs can work together to help Eldin make progress in his learning and literacy skills through common assessments and data collection and analysis. Other important factors of first language literacy, prior schooling, cultural background, issues of language, identity, and power for Eldin. On a positive note, with 2 years in the U.S. behind him, he's going to have those experiences to draw from and help his confidence in his newer country. A challenging factor for Eldin is that he attended school in Germany until 4th grade, and his literacy skills in German were minimal when he arrived. He has also continued to struggle his last 2 years in his literacy development. A possible challenging factor for Eldin may be that he struggles at school with his identity if he lives in a community that's entirely Bosnian. And then at school, he's in a population that's different from his neighborhood. A positive factor is that teachers can help Eldin continue to embrace and grow in his Bosnian roots, as well as grow in learning the English language and culture. Teachers will play an essential part to help Eldin see himself as bringing value to his U.S. school and community because of his home life. In looking at Eldin's BICS and CALP, with his level 3 on language acquisition, he's in the speech emergent developing stage. His BICS is fluent in English, so he can have positive conversations with his peers about soccer, what they did on the weekend, what they like to do. He does not yet have proficiency in CALP, that academic language. His vocabulary is 3,000 words, which is less than an average kindergartner, and he is in the 6th grade. He has simple sentence responses, and he shows good comprehension if there's rich context given to help him. So some instructional goals for Eldin based on his level 3 language acquisition level. His instructional goals must be the following: to expand his ability to comprehend the language he hears and reads, to produce language to describe, retell, compare, contrast, define, summarize, and report. Apply questions such as what do you do when, how do you react when, write in the areas of writing to write more details, and apply higher order thinking skills of analyze, evaluate, and create.
So moving on, the question is, how do we tailor instruction for Eldin? One thing that teachers might be concerned about is that Eldin does not always remember to put an S at the end of plural nouns. This is a mistake, a transfer mistake, stemming from a morphological difference between English and Bosnian. In Bosnian, you build the plurals not simply by adding an S to the noun, but there are different ways. One of them is changing the vowel, so a word like kucha becomes kuche. And sometimes it's really only the possessive pronoun in front of a noun that changes to plural, while the noun itself actually stays the same. Now, a teacher might assume that Eldin is a very slow learner because they've practiced this, they've done drills, he's done worksheets, and when he writes texts on his own, he still forgets to put the S on plural nouns. So this is not a learning problem that Eldin has. There's nothing wrong with him. It is a very natural thing to take longer to overcome this kind of morphological difference between L1 and the target language. He simply needs more time and practice to get used to this fundamental difference. One thing that he will benefit from is his teacher actually acknowledging this difference between English and Bosnian and taking it seriously, that there is something that is very different, and that Eldin has a problem that other students don't have, namely that he is used to a different structure of making plurals, and that he needs to overcome this somehow. Also, thinking about language structure together with his teacher will make him more aware of this particular issue, so that in the future he might be more likely to eventually get used to this difference. Another thing that's important in tailoring instruction for the student is to possibly lower the affective filter. The affective filter theory by Krashen claims that if students have low self-esteem about their progress that they're making, about the way that they speak the language, that affects their language acquisition negatively. If they have no motivation, if they experience anxiety, then they're less likely to acquire the language. In order to avoid this as much as possible, there are a couple of things that teachers can do. One thing in general would be to just create a very welcoming environment in which the student feels safe and comfortable. Another way is to provide primary language support, so that the student can have, moments where he feels like he understands everything, and there is not this constant struggle to try to follow the English instruction and to make meaning of the words that he hears. It's often not available for students whose first language is Bosnian. There are probably a lot more Spanish speakers or Chinese speakers in schools, so those are the kind of languages that are more likely to receive primary language support. But there are a couple of things that teachers can do even if there is no Bosnian speaker available. Teachers can offer students the opportunity to compare grammatical or morphological structures between the two languages, and that way raise the students' awareness of these differences. Another way to lower the affective filter is to keep the input comprehensible. The more comprehensible the input is, the language that the student is exposed to in the classroom every day, the less likely the student is to be frustrated, and the less likely the student is to lose all interest in learning English. And also simply, if the input is not comprehensible, then the student is not going to learn. Another way is to make sure that Eldin is not grouped with students that are a lot faster, a lot more advanced than him. He would, feel like the only dumb kid in that group, and that doesn't help. And then another way is to offer reading material that is familiar to Eldin and things where he recognizes things from his own country and culture. So he might choose reading material, books that are set in Bosnia, that are dealing with Bosnian themes, and so on. So the next question is, how do we tailor the instruction for this student? What type of program would be the most beneficial for him? And we thought that he will greatly benefit from sheltered instruction in language arts, in social studies, and in science. With his proficiency level being a 3, which means that he has a vocabulary of up to 3,000 words, it would be very hard for him to keep up with the reading load and the text complexity of regular classes. Textbooks are very text heavy. Science and social studies have so much reading that use academic and complex terminology, and to just throw them in with the other kids, the native speakers, would be very difficult for him. So giving him those 3 classes in a sheltered instruction setting would be of great help. Also, because he struggles with literacy anyway, his literacy development was interrupted twice. First, when he moved to Germany, he had to learn the language and he had to learn to read in German, which didn't go so well for him. And then he moved to the US and had to start all over. In addition to the sheltered classes, we also think that he will need an ELL tutorial, which could be a pull-out model with extra opportunities for him to improve his English and to work on the other skills that he needs to have in order to be successful in the other classes.
Okay, now on to tailoring instruction for the student assessment. According to Charlene Rivera's research on accommodations for ELLs, there are only 2 kinds of accommodations that truly support ELLs. The first one being testing students in their native language. The second, simplifying language used in the test. L1 is the best accommodation, but it can be very expensive and hard to create a test that is truly equivalent to their native language. Simplifying the language is an accommodation better suited for math assessments rather than reading assessments because they need to be able to comprehend the grade level reading. Eldin will benefit from several accommodations when participating in classroom assessments, some of them being extended time, oral assessments versus written, sentence starters or close activities instead of short answer questions, projects instead of written exams or essay responses, testing the student in their native language, and simplified language on the test. Another one that could come in handy is keeping a bilingual dictionary in hand for when he is taking the test. These are a couple important reminders for assessment for the teachers. Joint standards recognize that any test given to ELLs in English then becomes a language test instead of content. This leads to inaccurate results. Teachers must collaborate to tailor assessment to the student's needs. Create authentic assessments for all students. Self-assessment is something that Eldin will need to do and benefit to assess his continued growth. Formative assessment is a good way to assess how the student is doing and what accommodations need to be made or changed. Eldin's success. In conclusion, Eldin will continue to benefit from sheltered instruction in language arts, science, and social studies. He will benefit from his teacher's tailoring instruction and assessment to his needs. He will benefit from his teacher collaborating with other teachers, aides, and resources in the building about standards, instruction, and assessment. He will also benefit simply from his experience of living in the USA.